Hello everyone. Today I have two things in my possession. This tool and this material. Why do I have them? You may ask, or you may be like, I'm not sure I'm interested. You're interested. Today I'm going to be doing something called forensic sculpture. What's forensic sculpture, you may ask, and why is it important? Well, forensic sculpture is what certain artists do when they recreate what a skull could actually look like if we didn't have the skin. So you may think, oh, that sounds gruesome. Well, listen carefully about this. So forensics is an area of basically law enforcement where they dig deeper into crimes that have taken place in different parts of the country or the world, and to find out exactly what's going on, or to try to solve the case and figure out who was the innocent party and who was really at fault. Well, one aspect of forensics is actually taking skulls or, body, different forms, parts of the body, specifically though, the face, the skull, and recreate it. So in some parts of this field, you'll have people using digital technology, like they'll actually do a 3D model in a computer program to reconstruct a face from a skeleton. But we also are seeing quite a bit of artists, or even those who are not necessarily forensic artists, but maybe just artists who enjoy working with the medium of clay. They actually are taking skulls and recreating what the facial features would have looked like on a person who maybe died and then the face was really mutilated, or maybe a person washed up on shore somewhere and the face was so disintegrated that they couldn't no longer see who it was. I know it sounds gruesome. Or maybe somebody burned in a fire. It sounds even worse. But unfortunately, there are different crimes that are taking place, and that leaves, like, the skin and the facial details are gone, but they still have the skeleton. So today, I'm going to be showing you how you can actually kind of delve into this area of forensic art. Now, in forensic art, you have people who do the sketches in court cases, like when a camera can't get into a courtroom, but they'll allow a forensic artist to sketch the witnesses on the witness stand, or they have forensic sketch artists when someone they weren't able to capture in camera footage or in a photograph, they weren't able to actually see who the victim was in a crime, or who was the person who maybe stole something, but they can describe the person. So then you have sketch artists. They're still in the crime and the law enforcement field, but forensic artists, they're throughout the country in the U.S., and they actually reconstruct faces. Now, this can also be done in places that are like archaeologists. They do this as well when they're trying to figure out what people look like in, say, the 1600s or the 1500s, or even further back into biblical times, into antiquity. There are actually people who are scanning the skulls of those who lived far, far back in history, and they're scanning their skulls and making 3D models of them, and then they're reconstructing them using clay and tools like this. So today I'm going to show you how you can do something like this on your own. So you really have to keep a keen eye on anatomy. So if you love, or you've gotten some experience with figure drawing or life drawing, where you've drawn eyes and noses and mouths, then this is perfect for you. But if you haven't gotten a lot of that type of information, you still can learn more. You still can do this, because it's a process that you can learn as you progress through it, especially because we're going to do it on a smaller scale. Okay, when we start creating or recreating the skin of the skull, we need to have an armature. An armature is basically the structure of a piece of sculpture. So, as you can see, I used my hands kind of like I was kneading bread dough to create a cylinder type form of clay that fits right underneath the skull, the back, where basically our necks would be. That's where the clay is going. And I'm smoothing, using my thumbs to smooth it out and taper it near the base of the skull. So this helps get it secure into the actual skeletal frame. And then I'm going to keep molding it until it feels like it has to be a good length so that it's not so close to the base. And you'll see when we put it on the base that it's not really close. If I had made a shorter cylinder, it would have been really close. In fact, when I first did this, I made it too short. So it gave no room for anything else. Even though it looks really long here, the clay will end up compacting some when you're working with this air dry clay. So you see I'm getting a little bit more because I need to fill in the back of the neck so that, on the back of our heads, it tapers. It doesn't go sharply in and then down. It tapers. So I am scoring. That's what I use that tool for. I scored the clay that I was adding the other piece of clay to. This technique basically will allow you to for the clay to easily connect with each other, with the pieces to connect. So when you're working on this, just keep kind of pushing it in. That's what I mean by the clay ends up compacting some, because you have to get it in enough so that it then supports the actual skull. I ended up taking some of it off because it wasn't that long of a neck. It would have started bending over. But now, if you have a skull that you feel like needs a thicker or wider neck, then of course you can add some more. Just make sure you get that scoring in so that the clay sticks with it pretty well. But I think I'm pretty good with this. So we're going to move on to the actual base that I'm going to actually put the skull onto. So here we go with that. And you see my two tools. I have like a scoring tool and then a sharp tool that will help me cut and trim the clay. There are other tools that you can see by my my piece of by my bag of clay or my package of clay. There's a nice little wet sponge that is good to have. So have a container of water next to you. You'll see my container of water. Mine's in a glass container. You do not have to have a glass container. It's probably best to have a plastic container in case you have someone around or nearby that can easily knock it off, or you may knock it off if you wanted to make sure that doesn't happen and you break something. But I'm the only one in my work studio space, so a glass container works for me. All right. So now I'm using my hands just to smooth this out. You can use a rolling pin. You can use, some people even use as crudely as like a metal can to smooth things out. You smooth clay out. But I'm using my hands because I wanted it to have that kind of look. And you're just wanting to make sure you get all the creases out because you don't want it cracking. This air dry clay, it doesn't crack. It's not as prone to cracking as some, but you want to still keep it moist and knead it so that you get those little air bubbles out and so that it doesn't crack it cracks as little as possible. All right. So I wanted to check and make sure this will be good, but of course we've got to trim it up, make sure it's nice and neat when you put the skull on top of it. So I'm just trimming it up. And keep using that other tool to just clear away the excess. And then you want to make sure you save your clay. Because it's air dry and I'm working with it. But I'm working with it, so it doesn't really have a whole lot of time to dry or anything. But if you're going to not be using a whole container, then you want to make sure you keep it sealed. And it's resealable. And I'm just keeping mine moist with my my piece of sponge. And I'm scoring both ends. Now you want to make it as secure as possible. Now you may find that it's leaning to one side more than another. Whatever side it's leaning towards, that's where you need to build up some more clay. So if it's leaning to the right, add some more clay on the right. If it's leaning to the left or to the rear, to the front, add some more clay in the area where it's leaning towards. All right, so I'm going to add take the smoothing tool and just I'm using it as a smoothing tool. So just go in after I've wet it to kind of make sure that side area is nice and smooth and it's connected. Now, as you can see, it's gotten slightly compacted. So the neck is not as long as it was just because of the nature of the clay. Now, don't be too alarmed. It is just basically just the skull that we're focusing on. But if it's too, you just don't want it too short that you can't really get a chin in or do the chin properly. That's what you want to make sure. But if it's not exactly the full length, it's not too bad. It's okay. Not the full length of like a anatomically correct neck length, because we're just focusing on the skull portion. All right, so smoothing out, making sure everything's nice and smooth. I'm giving you an upward or above the skull view. And you see I'm maneuvering it to make sure that it's not leaning in any certain way, and then pushing the clay as I'm seeing fit. And that scoring tool helps basically clear out some of the area if parts of the clay are not really connecting, then you can basically make sure that it does. All right, so we're going to do the last finishing touches on the base and the neck area. Just making sure it's all nicely done, smoothing it out again. All right, and we've got it pretty much a nice base for our sculpture.